Hey, hello class. Wanted to try to give you a little bit of my take on these terms. Try and just deliver it out there to you to see if that is helpful to you. So, this is some notes on liminality, hybridity, and syncretism. So, liminality needs to be understood as a term that grew out of ritual studies, the comparative study of rituals. The folklorist Arnold van Gennep noticed a pattern that he argued was common to all rituals across time and cultures, that rituals happen in three stages. Separation from mundane activity is the first. The second, the liminal phase, is in which participants live in a distinctly different status in that they are neither where they were or where they are going to be. So this in-between status is actually a kind of statuslessness, right? So if you're not here and you're not there, it makes it ambiguous. And it's often marked, that ambiguity, in order to become something different, it's often marked with rituals of the body that could include the shaving of heads, wearing less clothes, right? Because your ambiguity, when people are going to mark that, it is our daily signs. And if you mess up our daily signs, then you're sending a signal that something is different. Any of you who've been through boot camp in the military, anybody who's ever gone through being brought into the public justice system, anyone who's served time in prison, probably plenty of you had some kind of an activity in a religious community that marked your move into adulthood some way, a first communion, a this or that. Any of you might know, be able to recognize these practices as something that you've seen at work. It's actually pretty common. So this statuslessness also means that the wealthy or the poor, the high status and the low status community members join together as equally statusless during the ritual, but likely returning to enjoy or suffer from their previous status, albeit transformed. We might think a Martha Stewart figure on this one, right? That she, in her orange outfit there, the prison garb, is marked as, she might have been a very wealthy, powerful woman, but she gets marked as being part of this common prisoner role, and it got rid of the other social distinctions that would have prevented her from being in contact with the other people in the prison in general conditions. All right, and then the third stage, then the reintegration. It's also, you might see the term reaggregation or reassimilation to the social structure. And you will have been changed by that experience. So Martha might not be slumming at the local corner after prison. She might go back to her really, privileged world, but there will have been something, a transformation of who she is through the process. Van Gennep articulated this theory in his famous 1909 book, Les Rites de Passage, or Rites of Passage. Now, Victor Turner was working a half-century later, which meant the whole new fields of knowledge that had developed in the intervening years, including depth psychology, structuralism, and the existentialism brought on as Europe recovered from 2 world wars, were impacting the way Levi-Strauss was thinking. So social scientists, including anthropologists like Turner, were very concerned with figuring out how social rituals moved and motivated humans, whether they were considering the parades of the Third Reich, or, particularly for anthropology, as it covered the new global arena, right? Because by the time, the difference between Van Gennep and Turner in terms of mobility and contact is quite huge. Globalization is really taking hold by the middle of the 20th century. So anthropology was encountering an awful lot of difference and trying to make sense of it. The difference between a Melanesian drama or an internal Congo drama or ritual, or so he had a whole bigger, more globalized world to deal with. Nevertheless, everybody had that imperative working with them, having come through World War II. So think about that as an impact as people are trying to make sense of how ritual motivates and to what extent does it control people? How does that happen? So Turner realized how important Van Gennep's work was for a meta-theory of ritual. In his 1969 book, The Ritual Process, Turner has a subsection entitled Forms and Attributes of Rites of Passage that is very helpful, and it is excerpted and found here. So this, you will see the reference to this, probably the tightest, pithiest place to find Turner's words. And Tiffany Reed, you'll see that these Tiffany Reed notes are in doc sharing now. And she actually, you can tell, is following, she has copied much of that right in there. So if you use her and draw from her, you need to know how to correctly cite where this material is coming from, right? So she's got, if you can tell up here, she's got the link that'll take you to this page. And this is direct copy from the text. So I know where this stuff is coming from. You need to know where this stuff is coming from. Make sure you cite it correctly. Okay? Turner continued to apply this analysis cross-culturally, leading to his 1979 article, Frame, Flow, and Reflection. And that, as you know, is also in the doc sharing. So there's Tiffany Reed, is the first item in doc sharing. There's my notes on these three terms, the two sample papers, and there's Turner, Drama, Ritual, Liminal. So Turner fully explores the implications of Van Gennep's work for anthropology, arguing that rituals and dramas initiate a difference from the mundane, the non-ritual, and the non-dramatic performance, and that this difference creates a state of suspended and altered rules by which the participants meld together in a state of communitas. Communitas is different from the word community, signaling that while community is built on hierarchies and structures and everyday rules, communitas occurs when the normal structures are suspended to accomplish the task of signaling the transformation of a person's status. So communitas, the melding, signals, and people who are participating are negotiating with that signal and negotiating with the fuzziness of participating, and will expect to come out transformed in a way. So the next two terms, hybridity and syncretism, represent concepts that scholars of religion and culture have developed in order to provide a more accurate and detailed description of how humans behave when their cultures come into contact. As such, the terms have a decidedly political concern. When two cultures come into contact, a negotiation, violent or otherwise, ensues by which a dominant, all right, two are coming in, a dominant language and ethos will be asserted, and the subdominant culture will thus be challenged to assimilate sufficiently to survive the level of domination extolled. So, scholars who like the term hybridity like its biological root, signaling the organic nature of such human encounters. And so I've got expanded notes on that that are easier, that I'm going to just refer you to that in this number 2 article in the doc sharing, Liminal, Hybrid, Syncretism. So how will you choose between these terms? If you're more like an anthropologist and enjoy social activities, from inaugurations to Super Bowls to baptisms, choose liminality. If you're more of a politically minded animal interested in the analysis of social power, then choose hybridity or syncretism. The great thing about our current academic universe is that every field is interested in the interrelationship of individuals, communities, governments, and the histories that bring people together, so that each term has an element of the psychological, the social, and the political implied. So we live in a great time where you don't just have to be an anthropologist or a political scientist in your selection here. Each one wants to be complex enough to account for a psychological, a kinship, a social, a political realms of power. Now, as you begin to developing your thesis, don't let the tail wag the dog. None of these terms are out there waiting to be found at work. There is no liminality out there. I didn't go to the bar last night and find the liminal out there. Rather, we can take these as analytical frames and make sense of what we see. But don't mistake that for thinking that it's out there and you've discovered it there. Rather, it is a set of lenses through which you can analyze what's happening out there. And maybe you'll see that as you write your paper. I've been surprised in the past how often students might write that the liminal in Jamaica, or as though it's out there floating around. It is a fabrication of analysis that is useful, but it's not out there floating. So don't let the tail wag the dog on this. It's a concept. People who study cultural phenomena carefully have found that these concepts help them identify more precisely how relationships of power are generated and navigated. The term liminal gives you an analytical frame for considering the transition in status that humans undergo, in part due to our aging process, and in part due to our desires and capacities to be recognized as members of our communities, right? If we didn't go from childhood to adulthood, we might not need processes for recognizing the change in status. So we are literally biologically wired and in such a way that marking that transition is important community work. The terms hybridity and syncretism give you an analytical lens for considering the encounter between cultures in the face of asymmetry, unequal kinds of power. Since there have never been two equal cultures, rather each will have its own unique structures that make it more or less powerful when encountering others, more or less resilient when encountering new languages, new foods, new customs, new ideas. So that every contact point will be marked by negotiations that produce new identities. And Homi Baba wants to really examine that third space where people in that contact situation, he's never saying that the third space is great, it's where two equals meet. Rather, he wants to see how does creativity happen in this kind of grinding places where cultures come into contact, exerting different strengths, different resiliences. I hope that gives you a little bit of take on these topics if you're trying to open them up. I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.